Hello everyone, this is Heidi, and today I would like to discuss the idea of sexuality as a fluid, flux, changing thing. So the idea of sexual fluidity, I don't exactly know where it came from. It's kind of been a term that has been battered around and bickered about for some time, to my knowledge. But I believe it exists because of the Kinsey model. I'm not really sure. Anyway, well, that's what I think anyway. Because on the Kinsey scale, as some of you may be familiar with, there's the idea that sexuality in and of itself, human sexuality and the expression thereof, exists on a scale. In Kinsey's original model, it ranged from heterosexual, extremely heterosexual, to the other end, extremely homosexual, and then he classified asexuality as X, which was off the scale, which I think kind of is sort of defeated the idea of the scale, perhaps. But nonetheless, I think that there's some validity to the idea that sexuality is fluid and flux and in constant state of changing. I think the idea is that, if we decide to use numbers to measure sexuality, which is not my favorite thing to do, I don't like numbers as a scale. Must be because I'm an artist. But if we see one person existing on a specific point of sexuality, I believe that, that changes over a course of time. Maybe not necessarily going one way forever, but, kind of shifts back and forth. So let's look at it as a color spectrum. So basically what I mean is that sexuality, the idea of fluid sexuality, maybe some, for the most part, you identify as canary yellow. Sometimes over the course of your life you may shift between that somewhere more on the yellow part of the spectrum to deep yellow. Sometimes you go the other way and maybe you might be sunburst yellow. So see, they're all yellow-ish, but sexuality is a little bit more complicated than saying it's a number. But as for sexual fluidity, I don't think the theory just automatically says, that your someday you're gonna go be, canary yellow, and then some night later you're just gonna be suddenly parrot green. I don't think that's how it works. Now, one of the things, the criticisms, or maybe not so much criticisms as one of the purported fallacies of the idea of sexuality as a fluid, changing, flux thing, is that some people use the idea of changing sexuality as sort of an admittance of, or that, you know what that thing is, that it's just a phase crap that you hear all the time. And I haven't personally heard that myself, mostly because I haven't told anyone who would tell me that kind of thing. But the thing about sexual fluidity is that, some people may identify, there are some people who eventually might be canary yellow or identify as canary yellow, and then someday later, far off in the future, be parrot green. I don't know what those would be on the human sexuality scale, and I'm not going to assess values of that because that would be not the point of my discussion. Anyway, but so some people might feel a little bit off when they've identified as one thing for a long period of time, and then suddenly, or seemingly suddenly, identify as something else. And I know that there have been cases where people have identified as one sexuality, and then they changed over at some point. They officially changed their identity. Some people have used that as like a way of saying, well, your sexuality wasn't valid before, but here's the thing. Sexual fluidity and the idea isn't so much the idea that isn't about validity. It's about change, and that how humans do change. And I don't think that, changing from one thing to the other invalidates the fact that you were one thing before. For example, a long time ago, my eyes used to be very distinctly green-ish. Are they green now? No. They're more of a yellow, brown, gold color. But does the fact that my eyes are brownish gold now in any way invalidate the fact that I used to have pretty green eyes? No, I had green eyes. And the fact that they changed doesn't really matter, I guess. And I know that, physical appearance can't exactly be, it's not an accurate metaphor for sexuality, but at the same time, I think that, at least for me, when I was younger, and sometimes to some degree now, appearance has mattered for some people as far as identity goes. Like people who identify as redheads, people who identify as blue-eyed people, people who identify as having freckles. I used to have freckles. I don't have them anymore. And I don't feel, like I've cheated myself because I don't have freckles anymore. So the idea that, sexuality is so somehow different because you change, and that somehow what you were before is somehow, no longer valid because you changed, I think that's kind of silly. And yes, some people might interpret it as a sign that you didn't really know yourself before. But I think that that's a little bit, naive. And to some degree, sometimes even if you don't know yourself, it doesn't change the fact that that's who you were, or who you saw yourself as. And I don't think that the idea of sexual fluidity or anything should serve as a way of denying people and, saying and as invalidating people of who they were and who they identified as, because your identity is your identity. No one can, really affect that other than yourself. So if at some point, you go between sexual identities as a kind of changeover, it's not something that's bad. It's not something that changes essentially who you are, and it's not something that invalidates everything you said before. So those are my thoughts on it, and who knows, someday I might identify as something else, but I'm not going to say I doubt it, I'm also not going to say I totally expect it to happen. But I don't think that even, if I do in the future, if at some point I'm no longer canary yellow and have somehow become parrot green, I don't think I will look back on my canary yellow days and think, wow, I was misguided, or anything like that. Because, yeah, hopefully the color metaphor makes sense. Hope to see you guys next week. Bye.